I have learned that wealth is a language spoken fluently by silence. It speaks in the pause before a door opens, in the softness of shoes on marble, in the way people wait for you to finish thinking before they ask what you want. I grew up bilingual in that silence, raised in rooms where nothing was urgent and everything was important. By the time I was 34, my name appeared on charity galas and foundation boards with a precision that suggested destiny rather than inheritance. I wore tailored dresses and an ease that came from knowing the floor would not fall out from under me. And then there was him, young, unguarded, loud with life in a way that felt almost rude at first. He came into my world not through the gilded doors, but through the service entrance of coincidence. I met him on a Tuesday afternoon when the city was still undecided about rain. My driver had taken a wrong turn near the river, and I told him to stop because I wanted to walk the last block. I needed air. The day had been heavy with meetings, with men who smiled at me like chess players assessing a board they believed they understood. I stepped onto the sidewalk with my coat open and my phone silenced, a small rebellion. He was standing outside a bookstore, arguing with a stack of boxes that refused to behave. The boxes tipped. A paperback avalanche slid toward the curb. Without thinking, I bent to help. We both reached for the same book, a dog-eared copy of poetry with a cracked spine, and our hands collided. "Sorry," he said, laughing, as if apologies were his native tongue. He had ink on his fingers and the kind of smile that arrives early before caution has time to catch up. He couldn't have been more than 24. His hair was a mess of intent and neglect. "It's fine," I said, because it was. I passed him the book and picked up another. The boxes surrendered. We stood up at the same time. "Thanks," he said. "I swear they were stable a second ago." "They always are," I replied, "until they aren't." He grinned at that, as if I'd told him a secret. "Theo." I told him my name, which landed between us with a soft, complicated thud. People react to it in subtle ways. Some straighten, some soften. Theo only nodded, as if names were just names. He worked there, he said, part-time, while he figured out what came next. He studied architecture, but was taking a break to pay rent and to read everything he could get his hands on. He spoke with his whole body, hands describing invisible buildings in the air. When he talked about space and light, his eyes brightened, and I felt the odd sensation of being addressed directly, not as a role or a resource, but as a person who might understand. I bought 3 books I didn't need, and 1 I did. When I left, the rain had decided, and he held the door open with a flourish that made me laugh. "Come back," he said. "We argue with boxes every day." "I might," I said. I surprised myself by meaning it. The city has a way of rearranging itself around desire. I found myself passing that bookstore often. Sometimes Theo was there, sometimes he wasn't. When he was, we talked about buildings and poems, about how cities remember and forget. He told me about his mother, a nurse who worked nights, and his younger sister who believed the moon followed her home. I told him less, and then, gradually, more. Not about numbers or names, but about the feeling of growing up surrounded by beauty that had rules. One evening, as summer leaned toward its loudest days, he asked me to get coffee. I said yes in the same voice I used to approve budgets. We sat outside a cafe that smelled like citrus and burned sugar. Theo stirred his coffee too long. "You make me nervous," he said, then laughed as if to soften it. "I do?" "Yeah, in a good way." He looked at me, earnest and unarmored. "You seem like you've lived 1,000 lives." "I've lived carefully," I said. "That can look like a lot from far away." He considered that. "I don't want careful," he said. "I want true." I should have heard the warning in that word. Instead, I heard an invitation. We began something without meaning it. Dinners that ended too late, walks that started too early. He cooked for me in his small apartment with its stubborn windows and forgiving light. He burned garlic and laughed at himself. I brought wine that cost more than his rent and felt suddenly ridiculous. We learned each other's mornings. He hummed when he brushed his teeth. I read emails before breakfast. We negotiated these habits with tenderness. I did not tell him everything at once. I did not tell him about the trust fund or the houses with views that made people cry. I told him I worked in philanthropy. It was true, just incomplete. I waited for the right moment that never arrived, because the right moment would require me to fracture the quiet we were building. He told me he loved me on a night when the power went out. The city went black, and his apartment filled with the small sounds of life continuing. He said it simply, without kneeling or drama, as if he were stating a fact he'd just verified. "I love you," he said into the dark. I felt it like a bell. "I love you too," I answered, and it startled me with its accuracy. Secrets have weight. Mine grew heavier as our days grew lighter. The truth came out the way truths often do, sideways, through someone else's mouth. A charity gala, a photograph, a headline that mentioned my family name with the familiarity of a longtime neighbor. He saw it before I could tell him. When I arrived at his apartment, he was sitting very still. The article was open on his phone, the screen a small, merciless light. He began, then stopped. "Why didn't you tell me?" I sat across from him. "I was afraid you'd stop seeing me." He laughed, sharp and wounded. "I see you more clearly now. That's the problem." We argued with words that bruised. He accused me of slumming it, of using me as a vacation from my life. I accused him of romanticizing poverty, of mistaking my silence for deception rather than fear. We were both right and both wrong. "I don't belong in your world," he said. "You belong wherever you choose, though choosing is easier when doors open." He pulled away. Weeks passed like withheld breaths. I returned to my routines. The silence welcomed me back. It always does. But love, I learned, is not quiet. It kept knocking. I saw Theo's absence in buildings, in light. I missed the way he said my name like it was something he'd discovered. The night we found our way back to each other was unremarkable, except for the courage it required. I went to the bookstore. He was there, older somehow, as if the weeks had written on him. "I'm sorry," I said, "for hiding, for being afraid." He nodded. "I'm sorry too, for thinking love should come without fear." We did not fix everything. We agreed to try, to learn each other's languages, to translate silence into speech and youth into patience. We walked by the river where rain had once undecided itself. The city glowed. I took his hand, and for the first time I felt rich in a way that did not require guarding. "I saw the article," he said. I didn't pretend not to know which one. I only closed the door behind me and leaned against it, as if wood and silence could hold me upright. "How much did you read?" I asked. "Enough." His voice was calm, which frightened me more than anger. "Enough to know you didn't tell me who you are." "I told you who I am," I said quietly. "You told me what you do," he replied. "That's not the same." I walked toward him. He didn't move. The space between us felt measured, deliberate. "I was afraid," I said. He smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Of what?" "Of this," I answered. "Of you looking at me differently." He finally looked away. "I already am." We sat, opposite sides of the room, like negotiators, not lovers. "So what now?" he asked. "I don't know," I said. "I was hoping we could decide together." He laughed once, bitterly. "You always get to decide. That's the point, isn't it?" "That's not fair." "Isn't it?" He leaned forward. "You could walk away tonight and your life wouldn't change. Mine would." The truth hurt because it was precise. "I didn't choose where I was born," I said. "No," he agreed, "but you chose not to tell me." Silence again. Then, softer, "Did any of it matter?" he asked. "The nights? The way you looked at me? Was that real?" I crossed the room. This time, he didn't stop me. "It was the realest thing in my life," I said. "That's why I hid, because I knew once you saw everything, I might lose you." He searched my face like he was reading a language he didn't trust yet. "I don't want to be your experiment," he said. "You're not," I said immediately. "You're my risk." That made him pause. Days passed before we tried again, not magically, carefully. "Tell me," he said one evening, "what does money feel like to you?" I thought about it. Like responsibility I never asked for. Like a room I was locked in so early I forgot there was a door. He nodded. "To me, it feels like oxygen, something you panic about when it's gone." We learned this way, sentence by sentence. At a dinner with my friends, he whispered, "They're all watching me." I said, "They watch everyone." "That's worse," he replied. At dinner with his mother, she asked me, "Are you serious about my son?" "Yes," I said, without hesitation. She looked at me for a long moment. "Then don't make him smaller to fit your world." I didn't sleep that night. Later, during an argument, "You always have a backup plan," he said. I call that survival. He calls it not needing me. That one stayed with me. When he got the offer, the job in another city, he didn't celebrate. "I don't want you to think I'm running," he said. "I don't," I answered. "I also don't want to stay just because you can make staying easier." I took his hands. "I don't want to be the reason you shrink." "And I don't want to grow resentful," he said. We sat on the edge of the bed. "So what are we saying?" he asked. "That love doesn't mean ownership, and staying isn't the only proof." He rested his forehead against mine. "I love you." "I know. I love you too." The night before he left, "Promise me something," he said. "What?" "Don't go back to being untouchable." I smiled sadly. "Promise me something too. Anything. Come back changed, not smaller, not harder, just more you." He kissed me like he was memorizing. When the door closed behind him, the apartment felt enormous. For the first time in my life, I understood that love was not something I could fund, protect, or manage. It was something I had to allow to leave, and trust it might return. He didn't call for 3 weeks. When he finally did, his name on my phone felt heavier than it used to. "Hi," he said. "Hi," I answered. Silence. Not empty, careful. "How are you?" he asked. "I'm steady," I said. "You?" Tired, excited, scared. Then softer, "I miss you." I closed my eyes. "I miss you too." We talked about small things, his classes, my meetings, things that didn't hurt. One night he asked, "Are you still there?" "Yes," I said. "I've been here the whole time." That That's what scares me, he admitted. I don't want you frozen while I'm becoming someone else. I'm not frozen, I said. I'm learning who I am without managing everything. He laughed quietly. That sounds like you. Months later, he came back. We met in a cafe near the bookstore where we first talked. He stood when he saw me, like it was instinct. You look... He searched for the word. Real? I offered. He smiled. Yes, real. We sat. I was angry at you, he said, for a long time. I know. I was angry because you made me feel small, and because I was already afraid I was. I never wanted that, I said. I know, he replied. But love isn't just intention. I nodded. I'm sorry. I don't want an apology, he said. I want honesty, even when it's ugly. Then stay, I said. Not because it's easy, because it's true. He looked at his hands. I don't want to live in your shadow. Then don't, I said. Stand next to me or walk away. But don't imagine a version of me that isn't here. He looked up. Can you love me if I fail? Yes, I said without thinking. Can you love me if I don't give you everything? He breathed out slowly. That's harder. Then try, I said. We walked outside. He stopped suddenly. He said, I'm still young. I don't know who I'll be. I'm older, I replied, and I still don't know. He smiled at that. He reached for my hand. This time I didn't hold tighter. I let it be equal. Let's not promise forever, he said. No, I agreed. Let's promise honesty. He kissed my forehead, not my mouth. And for the first time, that felt like love that could last. We did not rush into a shared life, and that choice felt like the first honest thing we had done without fear. We stayed separate, not because we were uncertain, but because we were finally listening. I learned that love did not demand proximity to survive, and he learned that independence was not a rejection. We met in the middle of days instead of colliding at their edges. Sometimes he stayed the night, sometimes I left before morning, and neither of us asked for explanations. The absence of questions became a form of trust. I watched him step into himself slowly, not with arrogance, but with steadiness. He showed me his first real project, a small public building designed to welcome rather than impress, and when he spoke about it, I heard a voice that no longer searched for permission. I stood beside him and understood that he was no longer becoming, he was choosing. My world tested us again, as it always had, but this time I did not shrink him to protect the peace, and he did not harden himself to survive it. At a dinner with my family, he spoke with calm clarity about his future, and when silence followed, I did not rush to fill it. Later, alone, he asked me if I was afraid of failing together, and I told him the truth, that I was more afraid of succeeding without honesty. Time passed without ceremony, kind in its repetition, and I discovered that love could exist without performance, without rescue, without debt. By the river, where so many versions of us had spoken before, he asked if I regretted us, and I realized that regret belonged to lives unlived, not to love that dared to be equal. I told him we had not saved each other, and we had not been ruined. We had simply met, fully and without illusion, and in that meeting we had chosen to stay, not forever, not desperately, but consciously, which at last felt like enough.